Teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the show. To my regular listeners, now, you know I've been very, very active in the NIL space. Very active. I've been doing Athletes of the Month for the past 4 months. And today, I actually have the first ever, this is news breaking stuff right now, Bel. This is breaking news. This is the first college athlete that I'm doing a deal with that is on this Move Swiftly podcast. So congratulations. Not very many college athletes have the courage. I'm going to use that word very frequently in this interview, but not very many athletes have the courage to come on here and speak on it because they're in that stage in their life. But there was something about a lot of the things that you put out there on the internet that really have triggered me, and some of the things that I've gone through in my life, coming from a private school, being an African American, and all those things. So before I make this intro too long, Bel, I don't want to do that to you. Bel Rolley, welcome to the Move Swiftly podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Happy to be here. Super excited. It's always cool to connect with people that think like me and have been through similar things. So just excited to be here.
Yes. Now, where I want to get this started, and the reason I use that word courage is because, like you, I went to a private school named Good Counsel High School in Silver Spring, Maryland. There were times where I was the only Black kid in class. There was this stereotypical thing that just because I was Black, I had to be a great athlete. There was so many things swirling around, and I've actually done several episodes on this podcast where I debunk that myth. But I didn't come into this realization until sort of after I left school. Well, at least I wasn't courageous enough to speak on it while I was still in college, because there was that fear of, oh man, can I lose the job? This, that, and the third. Am I going to offend people? So first of all, let's start this here. Let's just kind of talk to people about your background, but more so I want to hear about, where did that courage come from? Where did you get so courageous to be so bold and speak on these things? Because let me actually, before I even let you get started, I want to make sure the article, it's Behind the Jersey, We Must Address the Struggles of Black Women in Soccer, written by Miss Bel Rolley. So make sure you guys check that out. But anyway, the floor is yours for you to kind of talk about that a little bit.
Okay, similar to you, for those of you that don't know me, I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada, in a predominantly white area. I went to a private Catholic high school, where the only Black people you saw around you were athletes. And I think I was really fortunate and didn't come into myself at the time of going to USC and being surrounded by a lot of other Black people that weren't athletes. And I think that was the first time my eyes have been open to the fact that there were all these amazing African American people out there that weren't athletes and had academics going for them or other things. But I think a lot of the things that I was fortunate for is the time frame, and most of my work has kind of been focused starting around the George Floyd protests and that whole situation. I think it opened up a new space, but I don't think that confidence came without the people at USC. And
Right.
I was actually a co-founder of the United Black Student Athlete Organization at USC, which is one of the first in the NCAA.
Right.
And I think that kind of gave me the space. I've always been super outspoken. My parents kind of raised me to be, stand in your beliefs and be who you are. And that's not always an easy thing to do. But I think as I kind of came into myself as a Black woman, it came a lot easier. And I was always looking for someone to kind of be that person for me. And I actually met Anna Cockrell. She's an Olympian now, runs track. But she was kind of that person for me. And so I just figured that if I have a platform, especially in like the very short college years, that I don't really see it as courageous. I know it is, but just kind of being able to speak on my experience and hopefully reach a lot of younger voices that haven't come into themselves yet.
It is. Now, just so we're clear, because a lot of people may not know, Bishop Gorman is a powerhouse. All right, Bishop Gorman is a powerhouse high school. I grew up on the East Coast, and I know about Bishop Gorman because, we played them on ESPN. Actually, I'm in South Florida now, and I remember they played St. Thomas Aquinas. They are a powerhouse. I think it's the same place as Tate Martell went. There's just tons of big names that have come out of that school. What can you just let's go back a little bit. What was your experience there like? Did you feel like you were kind of made it when you got there? Because one of the things that happened when I got to Good Counsel is I kind of felt like hey, I'm one of the Black people that made it. Like, just because I'm at this school, all of a sudden things are just gonna come easy for me, when that was not the case. I mean, I was actually physically assaulted by teachers. I mean, there were people calling me nigger. There were things, I mean, there were so many microaggressions. And I love the fact that you used the word in your article, microaggressional things that just kind of you didn't realize were racial and really serious moments. So speak a little bit about your experience before you got to USC. So that way, we have a little bit of context in terms of how much USC made the difference.
Yeah, I think definitely what you talked about is like kind of feeling like you made it.
Yeah.
Originally I went into Bishop Gorman, and so I'll get into my recruiting story because that was pretty unique in
Yes,
terms
please.
of like being like the lowest ranked recruit that they've ever taken and then having a starting role in playing. So that's kind of a cool piece to my story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Goosebumps right now, like that.
Yeah. So that's like, I think that's a cool piece, but I think kind of going into Bishop Gorman, Las Vegas is pretty small. Soccer's pretty small, and I was definitely a top player. I mean, I started on varsity. People knew me because I played soccer. I would say that looking back now, there were a lot of microaggressions and things thrown at me, especially from the coaching staff in terms of like I talked about in my article, like, oh, you're athletic, just run. Like it was very much kick the ball to Bell and she'll run and she'll score.
Exactly, no technical skills, none of that. I mean, I was combing through that article, man. So like
Yeah.
you were taught the things that you were supposed to. I mean, I think you said like by 17, I should have learned these things. But anyway, go ahead because I can get on the tangent.
Yeah. And so it was like looking back, I'm like, those coaches, and this is nothing against them, weren't in it for the best like way to build my game. It was more for what they could get out of me, which I think is very much how the college athletic complex works, is like, what can we get out of these people? And then next on to the next. But in terms of like socially and everything, I was very much in my own world just because we traveled a lot for soccer. And it was like everyone knew who I was. And it was the same thing with a lot of the Black athletes. Everyone knows who you are. They don't really interact with you. They say hi. Like it was very, like I would say I was very distant, just because I'm sure similar to yours, like it's a wealthy private school. So there's a whole different level of like wealth going on there. So it's like I was acceptable as a Black person because of my athletic ability. But in terms of like my social class and my race, it wasn't really like, you didn't really fit, but you fit because it meant like a lot of the people that I went to high school with ended up going to USC as students. And now I'm in like the athletic world with all these well-known people, because USC is a school with a lot of famous athletes in college. So it's like, it kind of made it like, well, Belle knows A, B, and C because she plays soccer, and now we get to go to soccer games, and it's like this weird dynamic, but really we never interacted in high school. And I think that's like a really interesting piece of the
Yes.
puzzle for.
It definitely is. It definitely is, because a lot of times people don't realize that as athletes we're human too. We know we're human. We know we're every last one. And if you're an athlete listening to me right now, you're always one play away. You're one play away from not being an athlete, and that's the sad truth about this. And eventually, we have to figure out how we're going to find an identity when we stop playing. I could talk for years and hours upon hours upon hours on this very thing. Is we got to make sure as we're playing, we're building an identity for ourselves, and we're not making it so just being defined as an athlete, that's our identity. That's what okay. So that girl, just because she's a soccer player, oh yes, she knows this person, so all of a sudden she's accepted. These are the things that we have to address now. We have to address these things now, and that's why I'm so proud that you were able to find your voice and do that. So what you mentioned, you can go into your recruiting process a little bit, but I'll go based on what you had in the article. You said that the first time you met the Black coach at USC, that was the first time you actually felt seen and things like that. So was that what made you decide to go to USC, and how'd that process go?
Definitely. So when I was 14, my parents laughed about it because we have no idea. I decided I was going to play soccer at USC, and I was going to start and I was going to play at 14. I don't know where it came from. They don't know. USC was good at soccer, so we watched the games, and I was like, Mom, that's where I'm going. I write it in my notebook every night. It
Wow.
sounds like day, but you know what? Prayed every night, and that was like my thing. So I think kind of going into like the high school thing as well, and how like it could be your last play. In my junior year at high school soccer practice, I actually tore my ACL. And that was, I believe it was 3 months after I just committed to USC, and me committing to USC was like a pretty unique process because at the time, I wasn't ranked. I wasn't on a huge team just because we live in Vegas and there wasn't the same credibility as like California or Texas teams. And so I had committed, and they had said like, this isn't our normal recruit. We see something in you. We believe in you. There's something about you that we haven't seen before, but so we're taking a chance. So that obviously like was
Now,
always in
this
the back of
is
my mind.
so, I don't want to mispronounce his name. It's Kiende Mc. How do you pronounce it?
Donnie, Connie McAlpine. Yeah.
That's it. I want to make sure name
Uh,
mentioned.
yeah. So once I committed there, and obviously like I think my ACL is where I first kind of came into myself as like, hey, there's something away from soccer and you have to have other things going on. And that was a big piece at the time when I was 15 that Kadani and his staff had focused on was like, we want the whole person, because if the whole person
Mm.
um, is developed, then the soccer part is the easy part for us. And I think my parents always knew, like they let me make the decision, but they love that about him. And that was the biggest thing for me. Like once I got there and after your freshman year and the chaos kind of wears down, it's like, like he wanted the best for like, he would have a lot of like his Black players go to different events and stuff to like kind of solidify who you are as a person. And so I think that decision to go to USC was the best one. I don't even think I knew how good it was at the time. It was just like the year I committed, they'd won the national championship. Like it was the peak of college soccer. But not only that, like I was going to be like focused on as a person. I think that is really Kanani and the staff there is really who like inspired me to like be the person I am, because it's just like I was allowed to speak freely, understand my beliefs, ask questions, and I don't think you can ask for any more like when you're trying to grow into yourself.
Right. And that, yeah, I'm a little sort of envious towards that because I was a football player in college, right? And when you get to college as a football player, I'm telling you right now, it's a business. It's a business. Those coaches are on business. You got to win. You got to win now. Very seldom, you have to be very, very, very lucky to meet one or two coaches that are about developing the whole self. They want players that are going to win and win right now because they know that their job is on the line. Now, I played for two programs, and one of the things that was really difficult for me to do was to find the right major, to find the right course of study. Luckily, you know, I was able to piece together certain things and graduate in 4 years. But when you got to USC, I believe you were able to study something that meant something to you. So can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so originally, it's kind of a joke we have at USC. So the communication school Annenberg at USC is, I think when I was there, they were #1 in the country, but which is interesting because it was the major that they would put a lot of the athletes in who didn't know what they want to do. And so they'd like, oh, that's the athlete major, like kind of a joke.
Oh,
And so it was like, huh, okay. And I have to say, like my freshman year, it was purely soccer. Like I wasn't really worried about school. I went because I had to go because our coaches said we had to go.
because you had to,
Um,
you got to get the credit
it
out.
was, and then I got to a point where like I got through all of like the general kind of classes and I was like, I think I could really do something with education. Like the reason my parents had sent me to Bishop Gorman was for the education and not for the sports, but that was just like a benefit for me. And that's all I saw it as.
Right.
And so I realized that because it's such a good communication school, there's so many branches you can kind of go. And I think my sophomore year with George Floyd and like kind of finding what I was passionate about, I was like, I can take this major and make it like whatever I want it to be. And I think that was like the coolest part of my experience there. And like part of the reason that I think they set us up in that major as like an athlete major is because I had a lot of friends who cared about school too, but were just like, oh, it's communications. And we were all able to like find our kind of thing within this broad major.
Got it. Got it. Now, what was it about the George Floyd situation that got you so focused?
I think I don't think I was fully aware of kind of what was going on in the world. I think because I'd always lived in nice house, nice family. Like obviously my dad is Black, but it was never like I think I was protected from a lot of it. And I think the biggest piece and what a lot of us talked about at USC, because we would meet on Zoom in like meetings before we started the organization,
Yeah,
was
because
just
you
that
got
like,
to think, just to give people like some context, this was COVID time. Everyone thing was going to Zoom. At that point, I believe I was working on my second book, and actually the book that I'm going to be sending you for the NIL deal. But as I was writing that book, I put something in the book that happened to me that was really racially charged, like the physical assaulting that I took from two white teachers in high school. And it was because of George Floyd. It's because of everything I was seeing. You know what I'm saying? So that's what made me kind of want to, give you the platform to talk a little bit about how that time really affected you.
and I think being sitting like you're sitting at home and it's like I think the piece that really like got me was like I remember like I was watching the news and we had a Zoom call that afternoon and like I would say like a block from where our apartment was at USC, like there's a police car on fire and there's people rioting, and it's like, oh, like this is real. Like I think it's really easy, like as disturbing as it is, like, and that was my biggest thing, is how desensitized that we had all become to, and when I say we, like the Black community, of all these police killings and brutality and all this stuff, where you're just like, damn, another one. And it's like, well, that's kind of where I was like, and then it's happening like directly in the world. And I think realizing that, I think the biggest piece for me is that like a lot of people were looking for someone to turn to, and I just kind of felt like I had this voice and like the right personality to do it, kind of a leadership mindset that I've always had, but I was able to use it in like a different way, and that was away from soccer. And so I think that's kind of what started like all of it for me, was just like there's a group of us like all kind of wondering, and there are a few of us that felt like the right people to kind of lead the charge. And that started with like USC athletics, honestly, but I think it grew into something so much greater than I could have imagined.
Right. Well, shout out to USC athletics for bringing that to light. What kinds of things did you guys do? Like, what were some of the tactics and the things that you did to create progress and create awareness?
So first thing was, we want our athletic director to put out it, because they were sending out statements like all the schools do, the NCAA, with their like, we stand with you, we see you, we hear you. And we were like, no, like we put together like a 6-piece email, and I can't remember exactly what was in it, but I remember the first thing was like, we want you to send a statement to the university that says Black Lives Matter, not we stand with you, not like we want the words. And so we did get a little bit of pushback, just because they're like, well, not everyone agrees with that. And we're like, we compete for you every day, we're asking this. And the next piece was having representation within our athletic department. So at the time we had one Black athletic trainer, and she actually worked with soccer. And then I was fortunate enough to have 2 Black coaches. But the only other two.
Is he even still there?
No.
I saw he was at Georgia or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm not at USC still,
Yeah,
pretty much.
I was gonna ask you, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, that's our whole staff went with him. And then the other coaches involved were like football coaches. So we're like, and then we had a really good sports psychology department with not a single Black therapist, psychologist, anything. So we're at a time where we need support, and we talked a lot about emotional burden, Black burden, all those things. And the people we're turning to are people that can't even relate to our experiences, don't look like us, they hear us, but they don't really hear us.
Right.
And so it was just kind of this like coming together in unison, like asking the people above. And I think that's one thing that the athletic department and a lot of our leaders, Julie Rousseau, she was basketball coach at Stanford for a long time. She's, I think, their DEI athletic director. She helped kind of lead the charge of like bridging the gap between the student athletes and administration. But yeah, I mean, they were really open to it, and it kind of just built from there. And we would have like council meetings where like coaches, players, whoever from the whole athletic department would meet on Zoom, like on Sunday afternoons. And kind of be like, hey, just voice your issues, your opinions. What do you think could be better? What do you think? So we kind of became a voice for the student body, along with the coaches. And it was kind of cool to see like head coaches that you would never otherwise interact with, like just wanting to give you something. So like, it just kind of created a whole charge that was like led by Black students, but we kind of were tackling issues that were more than just Black Lives Matter and George Floyd.
Yes, and that, well, I'm glad you said that, because I think it is important for people to recognize that, yes, George Floyd, what happened to him was bad, but it really shined a light on a bigger issue, and we can't slow down. We can't stop. I get that it happened 3 years ago, but so much more progress needs to be made. What tends to happen, I talked about this the other day, what tends to happen is once we as Black people make one step, all of a sudden we forget. We forget and we don't move forward. I remember President Barack Obama saying this. He goes, there was a few people that voted for me, and a lot of Black people said, all right, Barack, go about your business now. We cannot do that. All right, we got to continue to progress and continue to get better, because we cannot forget that feeling. I'll personally never forget the feeling of being called a nigger by a white person. ER and ER, not like, oh, that's my nigger. No, nigger. All right. And
yeah.
derogatory way. I'll never forget the feeling of being treated like a piece of meat on the athletic playing field, knowing that now I have intellectual property out, being called stupid. All of those things don't go away. So we have got to keep charging and moving ahead. So, with all that, why leave USC then? Is it, what happened? Is it Oregon and then Illinois
And
now?
then
So,
yeah. Just really quick to your point about like
yeah, go ahead.
football. Yeah. One of my biggest focuses, just because of some of my good friends were on football, and I was seeing how like the disparities between like our coaching staff giving support to be this whole person, and then football was just like, hey, like get out there, like do what you're supposed to do, make the school money. And so we actually I like led the campaign of like I can't remember what exact wording, but it was basically like when you step out of the USC campus and you don't have an SC on your chest, like you're a black man before you're an athlete. And so we had like a really cool event where a couple of I think it was one of the black sports psychologists and a couple of coaches like led an event. I thought that was really cool because it was the first time that a lot of them said they've ever been looked at as more than just a football player. And so that was just something I wanted to note. But basically my story was
I've been such a fan, like from a distance, ever since Reggie Bush, there's been pieces of me that really like to see USC do well. But knowing what he went through after having to give up his damn Heisman for some shit now that you're allowed to do the shit he did. I don't know if you watched the I Am Athlete podcast, but he's like, I never went to give it back. You're talking about investigators and shit that didn't even happen. All of a sudden, he just has to give his Heisman back. So why not give Matt Leinart, like, why not put Matt Leinart through the same shit? Why is it that Reggie had to give his Heisman back? Johnny Manziel doesn't have to give his Heisman back. Are you kidding me? After all the shit he did, so
that's like
started down that rabbit hole, I would keep you out here for a couple hours. So
I'm with you. I agree.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was at USC after my junior season, we heard that the Kanani would be going to Georgia. And so we actually fought for our associate head coach, Jason, who's also black, to be our head coach. And the school basically told us, no, like we want a whole new staff, blah, blah, blah. So Kanani chose to leave based on, I think he's making probably triple what he was making at USC. They're not known to pay their coaches super well in non-football, basketball sports. And so I was there for the spring with the new coaching staff, and it was a very different vibe. They hired the white lady, and then the whole staff quickly like just became all white. And I was like, okay, well, that's okay. But I think if they're missing the pieces to what I want, then, So when our coaches left, I remember sitting in the office, all three of them, and Jason, our associate coach, looks at me, he goes, if you can graduate in the spring and get out of here, you need to get out of here. I don't think this is the best for your soccer. Yeah.
Wow.
And from like a place of, not like a place of like, oh, you shouldn't play for these coaches, but like, we know you, we know what you want. And I obviously was not interested. I didn't want to go to Georgia. I've always been on the West Coast. And he's just like, for the best of you, like, if you can do that, I think you should. He's like, if you're happy, if you think you're going to be happy here, like more power to you. If you can't get your degree, they were always big on us getting our USC degrees, then don't leave. And so I got to like 2 weeks before walking for graduation, and I sat down with my parents and I was like, I don't think this is for me. She was trying to phase out like the original people that were there, which happened to be our class, which was 5 or 6 Black girls. There were several comments in terms of like microaggressions made. Since we're on a podcast like this, I'll share this one. One day we were all talking, and where it was like a very high level team, like we were top in the country every year. The communication at practice was intense. It was like nothing like it hadn't been. And one of my teammates, one of my really good friends, had yelled at someone asking them for them to be their effort better. There was no cuss words, there was nothing. And she pulled us in as a team. I'll never forget this in my like soccer ever. And she was like, the way some of you guys talk, and she looked over at a group of us that happened to all be Black. It's like jail. She's like, you guys talk like you're in jail. And so I actually stopped and I was like, hey, coach, what do you mean by that? And she's like, well, the communication just seems like unintelligent and unaware. And so I like kind of took a step back. I actually went to our AD that day and I was like, you know what? I understand she's learning. She's a young coach. I was like, there's a lot of things wrong with the statement, inferring that because we're intense, we're talking like inmates. There's also a negative connotation towards the fact that people in prison aren't intelligent, considering that most of the population in prison is Black and brown people who are actually quite intelligent. I was like, there's just like so many levels to this statement. And that was kind of like, I was on the cusp of my final straw and I'm like, yeah, I don't want to play for someone like that. regardless of what race they are. That comment like that isn't okay from anyone.
But
So I went to our.
well, the thing is, I love how you made sure people understood it's not just about her being a white, it's just the comment. It wasn't about her white or black. Okay, regardless if you're white or black, making a statement like that is a no-no. So,
and there was always like, oh, well, you guys can just be on the outside because you run fast. And I was like, I feel like I've been almost taken back into high school.
high school, yeah.
Yeah. So I went to our academic advisor and she was like, if you take 5 summer classes, because having USC degree is like my biggest goal, like more than soccer, more than anything.
Yes.
She's like, if you take 5 summer classes, you can walk in 2 weeks and graduate in August. Like, okay. So the school,
five summer classes is pretty.
It was rough. It was rough. Which summer school classes don't count as part of your scholarship. So our athletics department, our athletics department actually agreed to pay for my full semester in the summer.
Okay.
Yeah, which I'm like very grateful for. And so I went in the portal, had a lot of different options, and I chose Oregon based on the fact that it was pretty close to home, a solid program at the time, and they had lacked any type of diversity in past years. And I thought a big recruit and a big name like me at this time going to a school like that could change the trajectory of what Oregon soccer looks like in the future. Okay. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of positives for me to go there at a starting spot, played all the time, like perfect scholarship. But I also thought, like, if I'm down to 2 schools and I can do something there that makes a difference, why would I not choose that one? Yeah. Long story short, had a good season. We just weren't, we had like 5 injuries, some starters, finished bottom of the Pac-12. Wasn't sure where the coaches, back to the microaggression. There was a couple comments that rubbed me the wrong way. Wasn't sure what this like season would look like. And I do intend on playing pro after this year. So I had to be somewhere with like a stable environment, well-known coaching staff. And so I actually got a master's from there. So I'm like, if I have a master's from Oregon, so I did a master's in a year in journalism, sports, social change focused. So I was like, well, education's top priority. So I got a master's. I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm gonna go somewhere for my 5th year, and it's just gonna be a soccer decision. And it's gonna be the right one. And so then I ended up at Illinois, which is totally random, but they also know my staff that went to Georgia, and they agreed that it would be a really good fit for me here. And so that's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah, you're in, is it Champaign, Illinois?
Champaign, Illinois, yeah. Small town, yeah.
Right. Well, there you go. Well, first of all, congratulations. I think that's awesome that you were able to. Well, what's cool, and the thing is, I have a niece now who just turned 14 and she's starting high school. And what I want to impart not only to my niece but all the young girls out there is, number one, you being an athlete there's nothing wrong with being an athlete, because a lot of the girls think being an athlete is not cool and all that kind of stuff. But more so, you wanted to be somewhere in which you can change the trajectory. So you removed yourself from being comfortable to saying, I want to change. And that's really what it's all about. If you are talking it about how you want to do great things in this world and be all this, you got to be in a situation where you're making yourself uncomfortable, because you know the next person coming down the line is going to be doing some major things. So kudos to you on all that. I think that's incredibly awesome. So I do want to be very respectful of your time. And before you go, can you just tell people how they can get in touch? Well, first of all, what's next? What's coming down the pipeline? I know you started to allude to a pro career in soccer, but where do you see yourself sort of the next 5 to 10 years?
Next 5 to 10 years, I definitely want to play soccer for probably 2 or 3 years professionally. It's always been a goal of mine. I'm at the level to do it. I think it'd be a really cool experience. But I'm actually, my kind of relating to all of this, my thesis for my master's was about the disparities between HBCUs and other Division I programs, and how systemic racism has impacted the inequities and the ability to compete. So I'm actually started writing a book on that, and kind of
join the author.
Yeah. Definitely reach out to you for some questions about that. But so that's like my focus for the next couple of years, year or so probably, while soccer's going on, because right now I'm just playing soccer. I have 1 class to stay eligible, and then eventually get into probably like sports marketing field, but more focused on the branding side and kind of changing the narrative around Black athletes, because I think marketing is one of the spots that I feel like needs to have the most improvement in terms of framing an image of Black athletes. And so that's kind of where I'm at, hoping to be at sometime soon. But yeah.
Yeah, well, keep at it, man. Just take it one day at a time. You definitely have the ability and the drive to get there. So, how can people, if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? I know you're very busy, and just kind of put all that stuff out there as well.
Yeah, I love like hearing from people, especially people that think like me, kind of being able to bounce ideas off each other. So I don't know if you have like you can put my email in. It's my last name Rolley, ROLL at usc.edu. My social media is just my name, BELROLLEY, my Instagram. Normally answer that pretty quick. So any type of questions or anything, especially the younger audience, I'd love to ask, like answer questions about recruiting or any of it, or just kind of what it's like. But yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm excited.
Oh yes, well, actually, what I'll do is I'll make sure this comes out the day October 1st, the day of that I'll announce the deal. So everything will come out like in one package. So
Okay.
So the final way in which I close out all the shows, Bel, is I want you to use your imagination. You're the Bel who you are now, but go back to the little girl who's the only Black player on her team. She's, struggling. She's doing these things, but there's something empty in her. Pretend that she just clicked in. Pretend she's right next to you. Give her some words of encouragement, and we'll officially close.
Okay. I'm a big write it down kind of girl. So I write this to myself before almost every season, every game, in my like little notebook. And it's we're proud of who we've become. And I think I would just tell that little Bel to stay the course, and that there's never going to be a point when you think you made it as a Black person, as a Black woman at any time. I don't think you ever make it. I think you achieve goals. I don't think anything's going to go. I always like address it as we, but how like you thought it was going to go. But I think staying the course and finding your identity away from a sport that you love will be the best thing that you ever do. And yeah, just remember who you were as a little, I don't know, 5-year-old or whatever. And that smile that was on the soccer field in the world, and kind of knowing that whatever you do, you can change the world in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be anything major, but yeah.
Well, this is a pretend mic, but it's officially dropped.
Drop.
Mic drop. That's what I'm talking about. You just saved somebody with that. You really did. You touched my heart for sure, but you definitely saved someone that's going through a whole lot. So with all that, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.